Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Monday, September 23rd, and this is episode 5 of The Holistic Alternative. My name is Julie Ann Mejia, and today we have a truly special guest joining us, a pioneer in the cannabis industry, a well-known published author, activist, and master grower. Today we welcome Ed Rosenthal to the show. Thank you so much, Ed, for being here today.
It's my pleasure to be with you.
Well, it's an honor and a privilege to host you today, and for a very important show and topic matter. So we'll dive right into it. You and I had talked back over the summer, and we wanted to talk about a show that would really benefit our community. So today we're going to be talking about how the presidential election can essentially affect the outcome of our industry. So I'm going to let you lead off and start and talk some of your thoughts behind the election and who we should be voting for in regards to supporting cannabis.
So first, let me say that I am very biased. I'm not looking at this as an independent. I'm looking at it from the point of view in this broadcast of the marijuana user and what is good for the marijuana community and who supports the marijuana community, who's opposed to it, and sort of looking at both the presidential races, the presidential race, and downstream, that is the congressional races.
Okay, great. And what are your thoughts? I think that's great. And I think, from a federal legalization perspective, who do you feel as far as a candidate that would truly support federal full legalization?
I think that the Democratic Party has hitched its banner to marijuana legalization. And I think that Harris has already experienced legalization in California, and she did nothing to thwart the industry. They had rules. Some of them were a little onerous, but it was a learning experience, and it wasn't as if they were trying to stop people from using marijuana. And that was both on a local level, where she was district attorney for San Francisco, and then as attorney general in California. So she, I'm not saying that she furthered it, but she did not thwart it. And I think that the Democratic Party as a whole has endorsed cannabis legalization.
No, I think that's a great point. And, a lot of people in the California region have a lot of misinformation about Harris, right?
Well, she's a stickler about, she was a prosecutor, and she's a stickler about it. And as the New York Times today reported, that as district attorney, she really went after serious crimes, but was lighter on the on less onerous crimes, and endorsed a lot of re-education and helping people stay out of prison rather than going to prison. Of course, when there were serious criminals who should be whose society should be protected from, that's when she was pretty strict. I think that's a good program.
Well, and you and I had talked about this kind of on the back end. She supported a lot of nonviolent cannabis crimes and getting those removed. Is that correct?
That's right. And in California, if you were convicted of most nonviolent marijuana so-called crimes that have since been repealed, they're not on your record any longer.
That's great. And that's an amazing thing because, again, this plant should have never been illegal to begin with. And we really need people in Washington seeing it for what it is, and it helps so many.
You know, some of one of Nixon's the documents from Nixon, or I think it was a tape, he said that marijuana wasn't particularly dangerous. And the only reason he went after marijuana was because he didn't like hippies, and he thought hippies were protesters. So this was a way of dealing with the protests, get them from marijuana, even though he knew it wasn't, as he said, particularly dangerous.
Oh, we've known about that for a long time. I mean, the U.S. government has, conducted studies about it, and when it showed that it was, medicinal, they shut the studies down. So
Actually, the U.S. government patented CBD and as a medically, and it kept it secret that it had patented it. And here's the thing: think about this. The government knew for many years that CBD was useful medically, and they kept it secret because they thought it would give marijuana a boost. Can you imagine that? How many people suffered needlessly because of government policy? And it was both under Democratic and Republican administrations. I mean, Clinton was really big about arresting marijuana users, 750,000 in 1 year. But since then, the Democratic Party has changed radically, and in terms of this, and they realize that marijuana is not harmful, maybe even useful to society. For instance, in California, during when we had the pandemic, marijuana workers were considered essential workers, and marijuana stores were kept open, and I think it was a wise choice by the government. I mean, would you rather have people locked up in an apartment or a house with alcohol or with marijuana? Which one is going to cause greater harm? And so, with marijuana, it may change your consciousness, but it doesn't make you think that you can be violent.
no, and I agree with that 110%. Yeah. It's really a concerning thing. And I think we're on the right trajectory upwards, to full legalization and, yes, making this plant not demonized, which is a good thing.
Well, especially the federal government, it demonizes the plant in several ways. First of all, there are tax disadvantages for any commercial establishment where they can't deduct normal deductions that other businesses would be able to. That's one thing. The business, we can't export because it's not legal federally. You can't get an export license to export cannabis, and that's a big. Most Canadian cannabis now is exported either to Europe or to other countries legally, and so the U.S. producers can't participate in that. And if they could, it would be a gigantic boon for workers and also for business in the U.S. Then other things are that it is still federally illegal, so people can be and sometimes are arrested for either its use, for instance, in a federal park, even at Burning Man, and can be the government sometimes brings federal charges for sale, so for cultivation of sale, and so those problems would be ended with legalization. Also, banking, for
I was
instance, uh, uh, businesses find it very difficult to do banking because banks are afraid that they'll be implicated in some way or other. So it makes it very difficult for doing any kind of credit card purchases. And most people don't want to carry $300 or $100 or $200 in their wallet. They'd rather flip out a card. And by making it inconvenient, the government is thwarting business.
No, and I totally agree with that. They need to open up banking for cannabis related businesses because, for many years they've operated as a cash operating business, and that's a dangerous thing.
Yes. And it may, you wouldn't want a jewelry, consider cannabis on par with a jewelry store. It has some very high priced items that are very small and have high value. And the difference between that and a jewelry store is a jewelry store, at least when they sell it, they're probably selling it through a credit card or some sort of credit account. And cannabis businesses can't do that. And so that there's a lot of money on hand, making it ripe for thieves, robbers, and thieves.
Well, and you essentially put, a target on owners' backs of these businesses, and
Yeah.
you make them a victim, essentially. You're setting them up for failure.
Yes. Well, it's setting them up for bad guys to take advantage of them.
Correct.
But the other thing is that with legalization, with full legalization, the price would come down because the cost of doing business would be reduced by these tax deductions that other businesses can take. And when I say tax deductions, I mean they can't. In some cases, they can't. Can't claim payment to employees, certain payment to certain parts of the rent or mortgage on certain parts of the property, and so that they have a higher expense in order to make a profit. And that also encourages the traditional market because it means that people who are selling without being sanctioned by the state can sell for a far cheaper price because they don't have to deal with the state's
And that's why
regulation.
some of the legacy growers continue to stay in the underground market because of all the red tape and the non-supportive government entities that we have, whether it's state or federal.
And this skews buyers a lot. For instance, if you're buying because you're going to a party or you use a quarter ounce every month, it doesn't pay for you to go to a legacy dealer. But if you're a chronic user and you're using a lot of it, then the price of marijuana really does matter and it becomes a price sensitive issue. And as long as you have these onerous taxes, the dispensaries can't compete on a dollar basis with a dealer. So that's a real problem, and it will be solved with legalization somewhat.
It's true. And, hopefully once federal legalization comes online, that we're going to see more support for medical patients and getting this covered and approved and paid for by insurance for patients that use this daily for medical reasons.
Yes, that's true, and I think that there are so many reasons why it should be legal. So I think that we've covered that. People who are listening to your program are all familiar with the situation and some of the history of how it evolved, things like that. And I think more importantly for this program is looking at what's happening today and where the two parties are as far as marijuana is concerned.
So let's dissect that a little further. We haven't really talked much about the candidates. We have A and B, right? Essentially, we have two candidates. Harris is the Democratic, and we have Trump for the Republican. What are your thoughts on both candidates in as far as supporting the industry?
Well, I'm not saying that Harris is totally enthusiastic about marijuana, but she lived with very progressive marijuana laws and did not try to subvert the laws or backtrack or suggest negative things. So we know that she is neutral to positive. And the people around her, they're progressive and liberal people, and they're very likely to smoke. And one of the reasons I say that is there was recently a study done that said that on a daily basis, more people smoke or use marijuana than use alcohol. So it's highly likely that let's say that Harris doesn't use it. I presume that she doesn't, but people around her do, and they're not freaked out by it. They're aware of it. They realize that it has not been harmful to California, and I think that that they have a lot of reasons to make it legal, and one of them is politically that it would be very popular among both Democrats and Republicans, majority of Republicans, for it to be legal. So I think that would be good and would give people a good feeling about her. And politicians are always looking at the mirror and wondering if they're the fairest of all. So, so she would be getting a lot of positive feelings about it, and she wouldn't lose any votes. There's nobody who's voting for Harris, or very few people who will be voting for Harris who will be saying, "Oh, but I don't think marijuana should be legal." I think that most of her voters are either neutral or positive about this. And then, secondly, I think that the Democratic Party and members of the Democratic Party have been vociferous in trying to get marijuana legalized, and it takes both Congress and the president to do that. And so it's important to have heavy majorities of Democrats in Congress, both Senate and House of Representatives, especially in the Senate, since a minority controls the vote. So you need 60, there are 100 senators, and you need 60 senators to pass a bill. Right. So if you don't need a majority to reject a bill, all you need is 40. So it's really important to get a large majority of Democrats in the Senate. And of course, it's needed in the House. You see how destructive the House has been under a Republican majority. And I think that with that, we will have legal marijuana before the end of Harris's term. As far as Trump goes, Trump could not get a majority of Republicans to vote for legalization because so many of them are bound to votes from evangelical Christians who feel that God's gift to humans is irreligious, and so many conservatives there that even though a majority of Republicans think that marijuana should be legal, that once again that minority and controls the Republican Party and Trump. So I don't think he would make any effort to push it forward, and I think that he might reject. And I think that without him, Republicans won't do anything. So it's important both to have a Democratic majority in Congress and Democratic president. And I want to go off marijuana subject for a moment about this.
Absolutely.
I've been around for a while, and I've been through a number of presidencies, and we've had some really doozy kind of presidents like George Bush and others like him, but there has no. But you know, the government and the way that it functions has a certain texture and has a certain structure set up. And that structure has been going on uninterrupted for 250 years. And Trump is the first person that is trying to change that. He's already said that he wants to be a dictator. He said, I want to be a dictator from day one. You know, and he said, for only a day. Well, if you're a dictator for only a day, in that day, you can fire all the generals, you can fire all the civil service. You don't need to be a dictator any longer because you can put in your own people. And he's very dangerous. He's trying to change the way the government works. And even though we've had presidents whose policies I've disagreed with and who have sort of not been honest, they have not tried to disrupt the American government. The one who did try that was Richard Nixon. And his own Republican Party, when they found out what he was trying to do, they told him he had to resign. And what Nixon was trying to do was call off the elections.
No, and that's important, you
Right.
know, to discuss everything.
Yeah, since that time, we haven't had, you know, and it's so weird. He won 49 states, and he was still trying to control the government. But I think that that Trump is more of an existential threat to the functioning of the government. And it's not just his policies. Whether you like his policies or not, that's not the question. The question is, do you want, on a more existential level, do you want to continue this form of government? And that's why arch conservatives who would disagree with every policy that I have, and I probably disagree with theirs, such as Liz Cheney and her dad, Dick Cheney, who, you know, I was opposed to his policies when he was vice president, and Liz Cheney did probably, and I disagree on many, many issues. But one thing that we agree on is that the American experiment in democracy, which is expanding all the time, and started out very restricted. At first, votes were restricted to landowners or property owners. And then it became more and more. And it wasn't until less than 100 years ago that women got the right to vote. So.
Very true. No, those are great points. And at the end of the day, Ed, I think it speaks very loudly. Maybe we should send Trump a care package with some weed. He needs to be on some cannabis, I think.
Well, for 2 years, I was saying, you know, he's a felon, and he's subject to imprisonment. And he committed more felonies, 34 felonies, and he's still out of prison. And he was found guilty of rape in a civil trial.
It's
just
atrocious.
recently.
It's atrocious.
Yeah. And to think that this person is running for president, I think he's going to run. Here's how I think he's going to run. If he loses, he's going to flee the country.
Ugh. What do you think he's going to do after that if he does flee?
I think that, I don't know what he's going to do, but the Republican Party will collapse. It will implode because he's taking it over so much. And all of his lackeys are in running that party. And I think that that faced with these trials that will go on if he isn't elected, then he'll leave. He's a coward.
And you know what, Ed,
he's always been a bully and a coward. You know, 111 people who worked in the administration have signed the document saying that they won't vote for him, that they're going to vote Democratic this time. I mean, these are the people who know him the best, and they despise him, and they think he's an existential danger to the to democracy. This isn't a regular. This, every election they say this isn't a regular election. This election will determine, and so on.
Right.
This is for real. We've never had anything like this.
And you know what, Ed? That brings me to a great point. A lot of people are freaking out. They're like, well, when Trump was in office, gas was cheaper and this was cheaper and cost of living was cheaper. What are your thoughts in response to people with the inflation?
Well, look, how much control does the U.S. government have of oil and gas supplies? That's determined by the oil companies. The U.S. doesn't say to the gas companies, you're going to charge this amount or that amount. That's done by the by the producers. And as far as food goes, a number of producers have had gigantic gains in their net profits because they have raised prices. And so there's been a change by these companies in how in how they raise prices. And in almost every industry, there are only 1 to 5 companies running an industry. I'll give you an example. Google and Amazon, they have no real competition.
Right.
No, right.
You're absolutely
right.
true.
So they can control prices, and other companies, if you only have a few companies making making a product, then competition is lessened. And that's happened in the pharmaceutical industry, where there are only 4 or 5 big companies, and there's only one company making Wegovy, which is a diet and heart treatment, and that company has such a lock on the market that it's changed Denmark's economy.
It's crazy.
And these pharmaceutical companies do the same thing. Take Apple. Apple has billions of dollars that it's holding overseas because it doesn't want to pay U.S. taxes on it.
Yeah, it's insane.
So we shouldn't be blaming the government on that. And in fact, the Department of Commerce and Department of Justice are filing on those. But these are these giant companies, and if they say beans are going to be higher this year, beans are going to be higher this year. And so we don't live in a socialist economy. We live in a capitalist economy, and the capitalists are the ones who determine the prices.
Oh, thank you for addressing that question. It's a big question in the community.
So what is would you like? You see, the thing is, the government has to deal with the companies, but they can't deal with them in such a way that's saying, you're going to charge this much for that.
Right, because that would be too much federal control over entities.
Right. On the other hand, what they could do is have an excess profits tax on the companies. So if they're making these excess profits, and you could compare the profit as compared with the price of the goods. If they're making excess profits, then the government could tax those excess profits. And,
which they should. They should be doing that. I mean, from a background of my background, even writing that legislation, the pharmaceutical companies are charging 10,000 plus percentage markup on some of the products they're making.
Right. Well, think of it this way too. Trump says, "Make America great again." Well, I don't know which part of great again he's talking about, but maybe he's talking about the 50s and the 60s, and the white picket fence for white people around there. little cottage in the country and things like that. But when at that time, the top income tax was 91%.
Wow.
So you didn't have a buildup of these super rich people. You know, if you take the 5 richest people in the United States, they own perhaps 30 to 40% of the wealth of the country. It's
Crazy.
really incredible. But you wouldn't have that buildup if you had a more progressive tax rate.
No, and I agree with that.
And I
Totally
agree with Trump then. Let's make America great again. Let's tax the ultra wealthy. So and you know, people say, well, the ultra wealthy help Americans, right? You've heard that thing. Well, we shouldn't tax them as much because they create all these jobs and all of that, right? You've heard that
right.
line.
Yeah, of course.
Well, think of this. Would Amazon would Bezos been able to make Amazon in Somalia
Right.
or in
That's a good point.
Ireland or
Good
in
point.
France?
Mhm.
Where would he be able to make it? He needed an infrastructure in the United States, an infrastructure of roads to deliver, an infrastructure of electricity and computer power and all of these different things. And most importantly, of trained, skilled people. And that only was in the United States. So Amazon couldn't have started anywhere else. So instead of we should be thankful to Amazon, Amazon should be thankful to the US for having an infrastructure that allowed it to be successful. And the same thing for Apple. Could Apple have that whole hub of of Silicon Valley and Silicon Valley Annex all over the United States? Could that have happened in any other country? No, because it didn't. No other country had the infrastructure. So the reason you can get these dynamic businesses in the United States is not just that we have great people. And by the way, a very high percentage of those people are actually immigrants to the migrants to the United States. They're immigrants, the people who started Google, for instance.
They're the real American dream.
Yeah,
That's what the American dream is built.
that's
Yeah,
right. So,
for sure.
And one person who understands it, I don't know his name, but it's a person who started Chobani, you know, the yogurt company
Yes. Yep.
that's so big, and he says he couldn't do it anywhere else, and that's the truth of it. It's not. We don't owe anything to these big companies. They owe us. They owe it that the United States developed an infrastructure that they could function successfully.
And that's
so
a beautiful
that's why
thing.
they should be taxed heavily to support
I
that.
agree.
Because if they're not going to support it, who will? And so I really do think that there should be certain wealth taxes. And if a person makes $100 million in a year, $20 million isn't going to hurt them.
No, and I
30
agree with
million,
that.
40 million. It won't hurt them. Just make them more anxious to make more money.
Now, Ed, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your thoughts and your insight on the election and the future of the industry as being a pioneer in it. We're almost up for time now. I would love if you could just let people know your website and spell that for them.
Well,
That would be amazing.
Well, just put my name on Google or any other search engine, and edrosenthal.com, and you'll go to all different kinds of sites.
Awesome.
There are also some fake sites, so watch out for that. It's hard to get the fake sites off.
I totally understand. And Ed, I thank you so much for your time today and taking time out of your busy schedule to discuss a really important topic. What do you want to leave cannabis consumers with today for the election? What are your final thoughts?
Register to vote and vote. And It's especially important if you're in one of those battleground states. And don't forget, in Florida, you need 60% to win the marijuana referendum. So if you're in Florida, if you're a voter in Florida or eligible to be a voter in Florida, you should immediately sign up to vote and vote. It's so important, and it's so important to all over the country. This is a dynamic election that we're at a crossroads. We're at a fork in the road. And are we going to take the fork that we've been on, stay on that road, or are we going to veer off into authoritarianism? And I don't think that most of us marijuana users would do well in an authoritarian society. So please vote.
Thank you so much, Ed. I really appreciate you joining me today. And it's been a beautiful show. And I hope you guys will reach out. Let Ed know your thoughts. If you have any questions, we'll definitely be answering them in the comments section later. Thank you guys so much for joining in today. It was a beautiful show. Tune in next month in October. We have another beautiful show ahead. And thank you guys so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today on USA Global TV and radio. Thank you guys. Have a beautiful day. Take care.